So, and with that, I'm going to pass it over to Kina to go ahead and introduce our next wonderful speaker.
Well, we are very privileged today to have Joan Cronin with us this morning, or this afternoon. She is nationally known speaker and a business consultant. But for most of us, exciting to us because we are Vol fans. She was the director of women's athletics at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville for nearly 30 years. Now, during those 3 decades, she built one of the most prominent women's athletic programs in the nation. Listen to this, resulting in 10 NCAA titles and 56 SEC championships for the Lady Vols. Impressive. She shares in her book, which you all received today in your goodie bags, and she has personally signed them. She shares in her books what happened behind the scenes in constructing a successful nationally renowned women's athletic program. And we are very excited to hear her share her story.
I just wish I could clog. That would have been so much fun. I don't know about you, but I love that game. I was Ruth Ginsburg, and I'm a huge fan, and so I can't wait to play it again. So great being here. I love the name Women in Water. I'm glad it didn't say Women in Hot Water. But I did think about, every time I thought of the title and getting ready to speak to you, for you, and you probably heard this, Eleanor Roosevelt said, women are like tea bags. Men don't know how strong we are until we get in hot water. Isn't that true? If you haven't read the new best-selling book, First Ladies, which is about Eleanor Roosevelt, you need to get it. It is awesome. So that's my first recommendation. You know, I love talking to women's group. For one, you have a great time. You could tell by the sharing and everything that's gone on. Carrie, great speech. I loved your stories. They were wonderful. I have a friend with me. Is Susan back there? Stand up. This is Susan Williams. When I talk about successful women, think about Susan, because she's one of my best friends, but she and I worked together for 7 years. She's working for you now because she's a PR person for a lot of your companies, which I appreciated. But, you know, when I get asked about Susan, I said she's successful for several reasons. And one of the things that ESPN walked in my office one day, and they said, Joan, why are the Lady Vols so successful? Well, I wanted to give them my 30-minute speech, but you know, ESPN likes sound bites. And they said, I said, the Lady Vols are successful for 3 Ps. 1, we have a passion about what we're doing. 2, we've developed a pride and have a group of people that have a pride in what they're doing. And 3, we've got the right people in the right spot. I hired Susan to come help me raise money for the Lady Vols when I first got to Knoxville. And I didn't hire Pat, but I kept Pat, you know, for all those years. So those were 2 really key things that I think helped the Lady Vols be successful: pride, passion, and people. Think about that when you go to work on Monday. Do we have a pride? Are we passionate about what we're doing? And do I have the right people in the right spots? You know, I love talking to women's groups, and it's always interesting. There's certain things about women that men will never understand. They will never understand why when we find a pair of shoes that we like, we buy it in every color, everything. And so they don't understand that. Men also don't understand the difference in off-white and beige, do they? I mean, they just can't get it. Men also do not understand in the morning when we're blowing our hair dry, there is a critical moment that they can't talk to you because you can't stop. Isn't that right? You know, they never get it right. Men will never understand why we don't like to go to the doctor and have our physicals. You know, that we all dread it. You know we do it. And please have your physicals. Please have your mammograms. Please do all of those things that are going to come help you get healthy. But just the fact of going in, once I get to the doctor, it's okay. It's that nurse. It's that nurse, you know. She comes out and this little lady went, it wasn't me. This little lady went to the doctor and the nurse came out and she says, well, we need to see how much you weigh. And, you know, and she asked the lady, she said, well, how much do you think you weigh? And she put her shoulders back and she said, 125. Well, she got on the scales and it happened to say 140. And she said, oh. And then the nurse says, well, how tall are you? She put her shoulders back and she said, 5'7". Well, the nurse measured and she was 5'4". The lady was again disappointed. Well, then the nurse said, we need to take your blood pressure. And so they did. And the nurse said, your blood pressure is sky high. The little lady put her hands on her hip and said, well, wouldn't your blood pressure be high if you came in here skinny and tall and are leaving short and fat? So there's certain things that men never, ever understand about what we do. You know, when I think about life and I think about what we're doing and what it's all about, I love my journey. I love the fact that, hang on just a second, I got paper stuck together. I love the fact that I was in a business that helped women learn to compete. Now, Carrie was talking about getting a degree in engineering and all those things. I knew what I wanted to do when I was 12 years old. I grew up in Opelousas, Louisiana. It took me to the third grade to learn to spell it. But I was a tomboy before it was cool for women to be in sports. My house connected to the city park. You know, Barbara Mandrell's that she was country before it was cool to be country. Well, I thought it was cool to beat all the little boys at every game we played. So when I turned 12, I walked down to City Park and I tried out for Little League Baseball. I knew I was better than they were and I was going to make the team. I had my hat, I had my bat, I had my glove. And this nice man said, girls don't play. And he offered to let me be a manager. He offered to let me be a scorekeeper. He even got desperate and offered to let me be a cheerleader and assistant coach. But he wouldn't let me play. And at that time, I knew I wanted to be in a business that helped women learn to compete. That's why I'm proud of what we did. I'm proud of those championships. I'm proud of all the young ladies that have come through our program and the success that they have had, because I dreamed about it from 12 on. For you that are Tennessee fans, and I noticed some smiles when Rocky Top played, I can tell you that the University of Tennessee was a huge supporter of what we dreamed. They said yes before other people said yes. And I didn't hire Pat, but I did keep her. And we made a great team in working together because we dreamed big. But we knew we had to work hard. Sally Jenkins, who is a national author, said this in one of her books. She said, Joan Cronin and Pat Summitt carved the glass. They didn't break the glass ceilings. They carved it. They were artists. They knew what they wanted and they went after it. You know, we never demanded. We never screamed. We never burned our bras. But we just went back and worked hard. We developed a great product and we sold it. And that was what it was all about. Now, you know, I didn't say anything about Pat Stair. it kind of helped us along the way a little bit. If I needed something, I'd just say, Pat, just give me a stare. It'll be okay. It'll be okay. But I think so many times we get so involved that we think we have to scream and we have to yell and we have to demand. I really don't think that's the way to do it. I had one of our associate ADs said that I was this other lady that was screaming and yelling about that time and leading protests. They said, Joan, you're just her in sheep's clothing and you want the same thing. And I said, that's true, but I'd much rather people want to be on my team than worried about what I'm going to come in and say. That doesn't mean that we weren't demanding. That didn't mean that we drew a line in the sand. That didn't mean that we were asking things we were unreasonable. When I think about how you handle pressure, I can remember when I interviewed for the job at the University of Tennessee. Pat was already there. She'd been there a few years. And when I came in, Thompson Bowling was being built. And we're going to have the finest arena in the country. And I got here and interviewed, and the president, the chancellor, and Pat said, we're not going to play in the new arena. We're going to have Stokely all to ourselves. And Pat was thinking, I don't have to worry about those men and scheduling and all of that stuff. It's going to be mine. But I drew the line in the sand right then. I said, if you want me to be athletic director, we have to dream big. It wasn't that people didn't care. They were just worried the arena was going to be too big for us. But when we sold out the game, the first game we had, and I had to go out on the street and give people tickets to the next game because I couldn't get them into this game, that night, I got a note from Pat. And she said, you were right. And so you got to dream big. Wherever you are in the decisions you make, don't think about what's good for right now. Think about what's good for down the road. Well, they hadn't even planned locker rooms for us in the new arena because Pat had said we were going to play in Stokely. So we got busy and we built a locker room, and a couple of years went by and the men got a little bigger locker room, so we needed to get a bigger locker room. So I'm making plans to make that happen. And I walk in the office one morning, and a staff member came and said, Joan, the men had a staff meeting this morning. They talked about you. And I said, they did? I hope it was good. And they said, well, they said, this AD said, that woman will not take over another locker room over my dead body. And I thought, ooh, that's pretty strong. So I could have done a lot of things. I could have run up to the president's office and said, he can't do that. Title IX says we have to have equal opportunity, or that's not fair. But I didn't do that. I simply went immediately into my office. I picked up the phone and I called this assistant AD. And I could have jumped in and said, I heard this and all this. But you know what I said? When am I going to your funeral? He stopped. He laughed. I laughed. I said, come on down to the office and let's talk. So don't be afraid to stand up, but you don't have to burn the bridge along the way. When I think about what it's going to take to be successful, I often think there are 3 C's that you need. I read an article recently that said you should only tell a group 3 things because they can focus. Well, I'm going to tell you 3 things 3 times, so you're going to get 9 of them. But I think that there are 3 things that I think you need to do to be. One is you need to be competitive. I know that surprises you that I would say that. I love to keep score. My kids say we play games until mom wins. And I said, yeah, we do that. That's important. But you cannot be the one, and I hear women say, well, I just don't like to compete. If you're going to be successful, you have to set goals. You have to be competitive. Now, that doesn't mean you have to beat everybody along the way, but you have to want your team, whoever that is that you're working with, to be the very best that they can be. And that's what I'm talking about, being competitive. You want to be the best that you possibly can be. I think the second thing you have to do is learn to communicate. You know, that doesn't mean you have to come give a speech all the time, but you have to be able to share what you're about. You've got to be able to write policies. You've got to be able to speak to people, and you've got to have the facts. Don't go in and demand something if you don't have the facts. I could go in and demand that we needed to have more people at our games, but unless I worked to get them there, it wasn't going to be. So learn to communicate. I think when I think about you need to practice what you preach. Isn't that right? You need to practice, walk the walk, talk the talk. So that's the way you communicate. It kind of reminds me of a story of a young lady, and I usually save this to the end, but I want to tell you right now what we're talking about communicating. You know, Pat Summitt was a wonderful person to work with. Our goals were the same. Our values were the same. We wanted to make Tennessee women's basketball, women's athletics, the best that it could be. And she wanted to win ball games really bad, but she wanted to win correctly. If you asked Pat today, she was standing here and said, "What are you most proud of?" She wouldn't say 8 national championships, 18 Final Fours. That's a record that's so amazing to me. Coaches dream about going to 1 Final Four. We went to 18 Final Fours. She wouldn't tell you that. She would tell you that every young lady that she coached over 4 decades, who played for 4 years, graduated. That's something that you're proud of. But you have to walk your walk. You have to be able to be sure that you're providing them with the best that you can. And we did that. Academics was very, very important. Pat was recruiting a young lady up in Kentucky. Where's my Kentucky gal, Carrie? Well, this young lady was from the poorest part of town of Kentucky, and the coal mining area. The education system wasn't good. And Pat was worried about her succeeding if she came to Tennessee. Well, I said, in our world, you can go up and visit with them, and you can bring them to campus and visit. So I said, let's see if we think she can succeed. So Pat went up to visit, and on the way back, she called me, and she said, "Joan, I still don't know if academically she's prepared enough to succeed." And I said, "Well, let's bring her into Knoxville, and we'll talk about, and our kids will get to visit with her. And as a group, we can decide whether we think it'd be the right thing to bring her to the University of Tennessee," because she wanted to come really bad. And I remember that Saturday, there was only 107,000 of you running around dressed in orange. It was a football Saturday. And I went down to the office to meet with this young lady. And standing outside of my office was a tall, attractive, blonde young lady dressed in one of the most expensive suits I had ever seen. Well, you can imagine what my mind talk was. I was picturing poverty. I was picturing all of these things that where her background was. And here she was. She looked like a model. And so finally, during our visit, I said, "You know, that's one of the prettiest suits that I've ever seen." And she smiled at me and she said, "Miss Cronin, when Pat came in to visit, my mother drew a picture of the suit that Pat had on, and my mother made this to come visit." Well, gang, I'm soft-hearted, you know. There's no doubt. She was signed. So sure enough, she came in her freshman year. She was not the star, but she was the blue-collar worker. And she did very well academically her freshman and sophomore year. But the middle of her junior year, our academic advisor came in and said, "Joan, she's struggling." So I called a summit conference. I called Pat and our academic advisor and this young lady. And we talked about walking the walk, talking the talk, that you're a student first and an athlete second. So as a team, we decided, and I'm saying team, so you got to think about you making decisions like this. It doesn't have to be just your decision. It needs to be a team decision. And I said, let's pull you out of practice for 2 weeks, pull you off the road to give you time. Not that we're punishing you because you're trying hard, but you need time to catch up. But to show you we're not punishing you, you can start at all the home games. So we gave her that lollipop. You got kids, you give them tough love, but you give them a little something along the way. Well, sure enough, she came, and after 2 weeks, our academic advisor came and gave me thumbs up. She's doing great. We went down to the SEC tournament, and we lost in the finals. But this young lady made the all-tournament team. And I can remember thinking, so proud. We didn't deny her an opportunity. Well, we go on to the Final Four. And we're getting ready to play the semifinal game. And I'm trying to be sure the coaches have everything they need. Everybody has their tickets. The president's plane's landed. We've got the alumni, all those things that I get to do before a game. And I run back to my room to change clothes, and the phone rings. And it's this young lady. And she was crying, and it startled me. And she said, Ms. Cronin, I wanted you to be the first one to know that UT just called, and I made the dean's list. So she made the dean's list. She went on to help us win a national championship that weekend. And the next year, she became one of the first members of her family ever to graduate from college. To me, that's success. To me, that's walking your walk. That's talking. That's communicating. And then the third C, we're competitive. We can compete, and we can communicate. But the third C is real important, is you've got to have confidence in what you're doing. And you don't wake up, you don't wake up and have confidence. You can go hear all the Zig Ziglars of the world, and you get fired up, and I hope you're fired up after we meet here, but you get fired up, but that goes away. To have confidence, you need two things. You need to learn as much as you can about what you're doing. That's one of the reasons you're here. And you need to have a mentor or a coach to help you along the way. That's why we're doing Women in Water, because I hope when you leave here, and I hope over the last 4 years, you have learned who's your mentor, who's your hero, who can pick up the phone, call and say, I got this problem, let's talk about it. So remember to have confidence, keep learning, and be sure you're having somebody that's going to help you along the way. So for years, I've said those are the 3 C's you need. I don't know about you guys, but I've been so frustrated with the culture of the country right now and what's happening, and I want to solve all the problems, and I can't. So I'm going to add 2 C's to that just to make it feel good. I think the world needs to have more civility. And I think that's so important. And I think the fifth thing is, I think the world, you need to learn to compromise. We draw that line. We don't think you're always wrong, I'm always right. I think that's so important that you learn to compromise. And we had such a great example in Howard Baker, who was our senator and chief of staff for Reagan. I was up there and we were visiting the White House. We got to go to the White House 8 times for 8 national championships. So that was so much fun. But this time I had to take a conference call, and I thought I had to take it during the White House visit, but I thought I did. So I asked Howard Baker, could I use his office to take the call? And he said, sure. And I watched him meet with people and meet with people and meet with people. And he later wrote a book with the answer he gave me here, because when he finished, I said, thank you so much. I said, how do you listen to those people all day? And he said, I have to listen like they might be right. Wouldn't it be great if we had a lot of Howard Bakers in this world, that we had to listen to people like they might be right? So now there are 5 C's. You need to learn to compete. You need to learn to communicate. You need to learn to have confidence. You need civility. And then you need to compromise. You know, I got to speak every year to the athletes at the beginning of the year, the beginning of school, and trying to talk to 500 18 to 22-year-olds. I learned real quickly it's got to be quick, it's got to be to the point, and you have to be very direct. So I came up with 4 things that I told them every year, and I think you could take this and modify it with your staffs and use it to teach them what you're thinking. I told them that first they needed to remember who they were and who they represent. What I was saying was, if you're going down on the strip and you put that Tennessee across the chest, you're representing us. You're representing the university, and that's important. But I think that's so true in life as we go through, that we need to know who we're representing. The other thing I told them was that my favorite Bible verse was Luke 12:48. And it says, to whom much is given, much is required. And we were going to give them everything we could legally give them to make them the best athlete and the best student. But they needed to give back too. And that was important. The third thing I told them, that they were responsible they were accountable for their actions, and they were responsible for their teammates' actions. Sometimes when you're working with a team, you think about what you're responsible for, but you need to work with them also and figure out what they're responsible for. And what I meant, if you're down on the strip and you see one of your teammates getting ready to get in trouble, go help them. If somebody's depressed, go help them. We don't take that serious enough. The other thing, and the last thing I told them, was success. The only place that success comes before work is in the dictionary. Think about that. You're going to work hard. You're going to work hard. You know, in life, as we go through, we all have people that we respect. I think we have wonderful people in the state of Tennessee, but there are 3 people that I can come up with. I'm not going to put Elvis in this one, but there are 3 people that don't need a last name. And the reason they don't need a last name is not because of what they do, but it's what they stand for. Anybody want to name one of them that you might say? 3 people in Tennessee who don't need a... Dolly, we got it. Dolly's one. Who else? How about Pat? We all know who it is if we say Pat. And Peyton. Those are 3 people that we don't need. And why? Okay, let's start with Dolly, because y'all all got that one first. We all know Dolly's a great actress, a great singer, a great entertainer. But you know why, to me, she doesn't need a last name? If she gives back. Who else could have raised $14 million for Gatlinburg in one day? And she could do it because she gives back. And I just saw where she made a huge gift in Nashville this week. Dolly gives back. So it's great that she has a great voice. I love Dolly. And when I heard Garth Brooks the other day say that he thought the king of country music was really a queen, and it was Dolly. I thought that was a great line. Peyton. Why does Peyton? Peyton's a great athlete. He's a great quarterback, pros, college. He doesn't need a last name because of his attention to detail. Of all the athletes I've ever worked with, he watched more film, he planned more, and everything had to be just right. Susan can tell you he does a fundraiser for us for the Pat Summitt Foundation, and he is so involved. He wants control. He wants to know who's coming. He wants to know exactly what we're good. He wants it to be perfect. One morning, Sunday morning at 6 a.m., my Twitter goes tweet, and I looked at it, and it was Peyton with a suggestion about what we should do for the party that coming week. So I tweeted him back at 6 a.m. in the morning, and which is in Denver, it was even earlier. And I said, "Have you been watching your commercials? Are you Lionel Richie? Is this easy like Sunday morning? And do you have your bathrobe on?" But Peyton doesn't need a last name because he plans, and his detail is so important. The third one to me is Pat. And we all know Pat is a great coach. We all know her because of her stare. We all know those things. But to me, the thing that made Pat so special was her humility. The night we had our celebration of life, we had a reunion of all of our athletes that she had coached over the 40 years she coached at Tennessee. And I called a team meeting, and we got in a huddle. And I told them that night that never in my lifetime or their lifetime would we meet anybody who had won more awards than Pat Summitt. I mean, you name it, she won it. But I said, the most important thing that you need to know, never will you meet anybody that is more humble than Pat Summitt. I can't tell you how many times since she's passed away, I'll be walking down the street and somebody will come up and say, "Joan, I miss Pat so much. You know, when my daughter was sick at the hospital, she went to see her. I stood out in the rain where Pat could sign a ball, and she stayed there to sign that. She did this, she did that." And I think those are so important. So if you want to name, you want to not have a last name, think about what's your signature. Do you give back? Do you have humility? And are you taking care of the details as we go? Those are some of the things that I think it takes to be successful. When I think about Pat and I think about Peyton and planning ahead, I have to tell you one little sidebar. Pat and I had a lot of things in common, and one of them was we usually left late and had to drive too fast to get there to make up. So we got to visit with a lot of policemen along the way. And especially between Knoxville and Nashville, there was always some kind of meeting. And we'd get ready to leave, and she always wanted to drive because she thought she could drive faster than I could. And she would always put her purse in her trunk as we got ready to leave. And if we happened to get stopped, the policeman, she was always very polite. Never once did I hear her say, "Do you know who I am and what I did?" or anything like that. She was always so polite, but she very quietly would say, "Well, my purse is in the trunk. Do you mind if I get my license?" And of course, he would say yes. And she would go back and get her license. And also in the trunk was an autographed basketball. We never got a ticket. We never got a ticket. Oh, so my challenge to you as we finish here is enjoy life. I get asked a lot, "Joan, what did you teach Pat? What did Pat teach you?" Well, it's easy for me to think about what Pat taught me, so many things. But when I think about Pat, I think about the humility, and I also think about her ability to multitask. She could be cooking corn on the stove and talking to a recruit and yelling at Tyler to go do this all at the same time. So she knew how to multitask so well. And then when I think about what I taught her, one of the things that she was very serious, especially about coaching. Especially, I'd say, "Pat, we got an invite to do this," and she'd say, "I got practice that day. I can't leave." She was so serious about what she was doing. She was so focused. And I hope I taught Pat to enjoy the journey. And I challenge you is that, women that are working and are successful and are climbing the ladder, sometimes we let life get out of perspective. Enjoy your stay in Gatlinburg. What a great it's going to be. Enjoy the people that you're around, and just enjoy life. If you can do that, that's what I call being successful. In life, I'm a tennis nut. In life and in tennis, it is better to serve than receive. Think about that. In life And in tennis, it is better to serve than receive. I am so happy to be a part of your group. I love that we are women in water and not hot water. I think that those are really, really important. And my challenge to you is take some of these keys. And if you read the book, I think you'll hear a lot of the same things. So you're getting reinforced. I loved writing that book because it allowed me to, the reason I got into athletics was to help women succeed. And I think sports teaches you so many things. So enjoy, have fun, and I'm so proud to be a part of your group.
Thank you. We're not going to let you go yet, quite yet. Does anyone have any questions for Joan? I'll come around with the mic.
All right.
Don't be shy. A whole bunch of wonderful ladies.
Okay.
Which player were you talking about?
I get that question a lot. I don't share that, but she's very successful and doing well. So, but that's great.
I love it. I love it.
Other questions? Yes. How many children did I raise? Oh, I tell you what, I have my own personal children. I have 2 daughters, 2 of the best son-in-laws in the world, and 5 grandchildren that just keep me going. So it's just so much fun. And I think, but you always get this question out of a women's group, is balancing life. I never get that out of a men's group. We will really have made progress when a man asks me, Joan, how do I balance my life? It's because we do it for them. But I do think it's important. And I will, my late husband, I had the best marriage and best 40 years of marriage in the world because we were a team. And I just loved the fact that he thought what I did was just as important as what he did. And we worked so well together. So I think that's the way you balance your life. If you do want to be married and you do want to have children and a job, I think it's got to be a team effort. Without that, I think and I know lots of people who could have been successful, but they didn't have that teamwork. And it just, you can't balance. And I sometimes think you have to make choices. And sometimes you say, can we have it all? Sometimes we can't at the same time. We just have to balance that. And you have to realize and share that this might not be the year I take this chairmanship of this committee because I don't have time because I have a 13-year-old and that's going to take a lot of my time. But I can do it in 2 years or something like that. So I thank you. But thank you for the question. I've got a grandson that's getting married Labor Day weekend, and he's smart enough to get married at West Palm Beach. So I'm ready to go and excited about it. So thank you. Other questions?
Joan?
Yes.
You talked about tough love and not denying people opportunities. Was that always easy for you, or what were kind of ways that you learned how to do that well?
You make a mistake real easy. If you don't, one of the things I tried to do was answer immediately and correct immediately, because the longer you wait, the bigger the problem gets. And so I think that to have open discussions with people, and obviously I don't have to tell you they need to be one-on-one. If they're tough, you don't do it in front of a group and that type of thing. But I think that communication factor with people, one of the things I watched Pat coach, and she was tough. I'm not sure she could have survived in today's world in the culture. It would have been really tough, but she could be tough because those kids knew she cared about them. They knew that she was going to have their back, but they knew that she expected. So set the rules, set the goals, and don't be afraid to make the tough question. Good questions. Y'all great. I hope you have a great time. I've had a wonderful time. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm really proud to live in the state of Tennessee. We are so lucky, and we need to, that's coming from a Louisiana Cajun. I am a Cajun with orange blood, and I love it. And I want to spend the rest of my life right here in Knoxville, Tennessee, and in the state of Tennessee. So thank you. Have fun. And I was so glad. What I would like to do is let me hear from you with some ideas from the book and what you thought and things that might happen. So thank you.
I just have to say that she's never going to talk about this herself, but she is a very humble person. Read her book. It is phenomenal. And I do appreciate, Joan, you taking the time to join us today.
Hey, she's a leader. She asked, she delivered, and came to my house and got the books and all of those things. So it was fun getting prepared for this group. And again, I'm proud that we have so many women in leadership roles in water. So that's exciting, and engineering, and it's fun to see the success of women in today's world. So thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate
Mhm. Thank you.